Dear students, you asked me a few weeks ago about regrets that I had about situations where I didn't speak up in my newsrooms, unlike the current generation of reporters who are speaking up all the time. And I shared with you a few examples, but I also told you that I'm going to share another one, a bigger example, and one that's probably my biggest regret in my career. I was a young reporter at the Mercury News when my editors put me on an investigative project, a series looking at problems in the county's criminal justice system that led to criminal convictions or questionable convictions. So I helped fact check the project, filled in on database work since our data editor was leaving, and I did some reporting and follow-ups. For one of the cases, my editors asked me to try to find out if the two eyewitnesses were telling the truth when they testified against a guy named George Vargas. He was the defendant in a questionable conviction that we were looking into. So I went to the homes of former gang members, convicted criminals, just talking to them and knocking on doors and seeing if they had any information, if they knew where the whereabouts of the eyewitnesses. There were a lot of dead ends. And I was close to giving up when I finally learned that one of the two key eyewitnesses, was in a local women's prison. So I visited her and we were talking, and sure enough, she recanted. She told me she did not actually see George do it, even though that's what she had testified. So of course I took profuse notes, went back to the office, ready to, write up a story. And my veteran colleague who had initiated the project, it was his idea, he did most of the work on it. He said, great, now go get her statement in writing in what's called a sworn declaration. So, I typed up everything she told me, took that document to the prison and, told her about it. This is a sworn declaration. Basically, I tried to summarize what you told me. Can you please read it? And if you agree to it, can you sign it? And she did. So I was like, wow. When I got back to the office and told my colleague about that, he encouraged me to call the district attorney's office to see if the new information would change their approach to this case. And the prosecutor said, no, it would not. I don't remember the exact reason right now. So I told my colleagues and they decided that, okay, well, we don't need to do another follow-up story on this. George's case had been mentioned in the main story for some other flaws. So just, leave it alone at this point. I told George, who was obviously disappointed, though he found that affidavit, that sworn declaration, helpful to other parts of his case. He used that. I know when he went to a few employers, for instance. But I also heard from him, he kept in touch. And over the years, I heard from him about how, some situations where he applied for so many different jobs and couldn't get one because of his record. And, as I grew personally and in my career, I also, started realizing something. And I also, as I heard some of the problems that George faced, some of the struggles because of his record, something gnawed at me. I realized that I had not done his story justice. I really should have pushed to do that story about the eyewitness recanting, because after all, she was one of only two people who initially said they saw it, right? And it seemed that the conviction was mainly based on that. I should not have stayed silent. I should have spoken up. It's just that at the time, when I go back and think of the position that I was in, I was this young, newish reporter. And I was just so thankful to be on a project of that magnitude with colleagues who are so esteemed and had done such great work, been nominated for multiple Pulitzers, that I didn't feel it was my right, or didn't feel I was empowered to do that. And so I just didn't say anything. But I should have. The story was not about me. I should have spoken up, not for myself or for any story that I wanted to pursue, but I should have done it for George. My failure to do that, ended up affecting his life much more deeply than I could have ever imagined.